Hey everybody, Drew Reynolds here, Director of Student Ministries at Cal Prairie Community Church. I hope that you are having a wonderful start to your new year. I hope that as you've gotten back into school or you're about ready to get back into school, you're really just preparing your hearts and your minds and just really enjoying that time you have to be in class with your classmates, especially after part of this year where you had to do it sitting on a computer. Well, this week we're going to be looking into more of that God-sized goal that we talked about last week. So last week we talked about this guy named Nehemiah and how he had this God-sized goal and how he wanted to complete it, and how me and you should look to have these God-sized goals as well. Now here's a question for you. This goes for any goal. Have you ever been stuck trying to complete a goal? I certainly have. And I'm sure pretty much everyone has. To be honest, I think getting stuck when you're trying to solve a goal is just, it just happens. It's human nature. Here's the thing, though. Majority of people eventually get unstuck from having that goal. And how they get unstuck is by having a plan. Now, as people, God gives us the ability to solve problems. He gives us the ability to see an issue and to fix it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean every single one of us could fix every single thing we need to. Like if my car broke down, I can change a battery, I can change a tire, I can change an alternator, I can change a radiator, I can change those things. But if my transmission's going out or my engine's going bad, I can't do that. But see, here's how I fix that problem is I can come up with a plan. I can sit here and be like, well, I can't do that, but I can call a dealership. And when I call this dealership, they can get my car in, they can get it fixed and get it back to me. Now, again, not everybody can solve every problem. But there's typically people out there who have the ability to solve the problem. And even our problem, someone else could potentially help us solve it. But to get to that point, we need to make a plan. Now let's look at an example of someone who had a plan, and that's why having a God-sized goal and completing a God-sized goal was truly capable for him. That person is Nehemiah. Yeah, I know we talked about him last week, but he's a pretty cool guy. Nehemiah is a shining example of having a God-sized goal, setting a plan, and completing his goal. But let's take a little minute and recap on Nehemiah. First off, Nehemiah, during this time, Jerusalem's destroyed. Conquerors came in, they destroyed Jerusalem, it's no longer there. Well, the city's there, but it's no longer a stronghold. The walls are broken, the walls are busted. And the people of Christ, the Jewish people, are in exile. They're spread out. Nehemiah is one of these. In fact, he's a cupbearer for a king. Now let's jump back to Nehemiah. So let's look a little more into him. So Nehemiah, Jewish guy, Jerusalem destroyed, he's in exile. As I said before, he's a cupbearer for a king. But he had a God-sized goal. And his goal was to restore Jerusalem back to the way it was supposed to be. And that was by helping rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Now, when they rebuilt the walls, it really did two things for Jerusalem. One, as I said last week, it built a structure. It kept from outside invaders. It made the city safe because it wasn't people would be able to come in and out freely through a downed wall. But two, when he was going to rebuild these walls, it would honor God because this was God's city. This was God's place, the place he set for the Jewish people. And this wall being down is like saying, hey, God, I will respect what you've given me and I will fight for it. Now here's the next step. Nehemiah had his goal. Now it's time for the plan. Last week we read Nehemiah's chapter 1 and chapter 2 through verses 4. This week we're going to look into Nehemiah chapter 1, but 2 specific verses. We're going to look at verses 4 and 11. Now, if you read these are the verses where the first one, it speaks of Nehemiah going to prayer. He goes and he talks to God, and he worships and he prays, and he takes some time after hearing that Jerusalem was still broken down, still beaten, and still destroyed. Now, Nehemiah, in this process of prayer, he starts to develop a plan. Now, verse 11. This is the second time Nehemiah goes to God in prayer. This time, he goes to God saying, hey, this is my goal. Help me. Now here, let's break a few things down about this. Now, first off, Nehemiah, he didn't go to God and say, hey, God, can you give me a step-by-step process to help me rebuild the walls, to get to where I need to be to get back to Jerusalem? He didn't do that. He knew a plan, and he was starting it. And that's the second thing. Nehemiah was already working on a plan. If you read, I think it's verse 11, he says, Lord, help me put my plan into action. Those are not exact words, but it's similar to that. So Nehemiah was already starting to build a plan on how he was going to do this. The next thing Nehemiah did is he took note of what God gave him. Now, he realized that Nehemiah, he knew he would need help. He couldn't do this alone. So he looked at where he was at. He was a cupbearer of the king. He even realized and saw this king as a friend. So he took the powerful people around him and he recognized he could use them. And the last thing Nehemiah did is he planned while he prayed. Now, Nehemiah was a strong man, smart man. That's why he planned while he prayed. He sat there and he made a plan because he was making the plan while he was talking to God, because he just had a little more faith in this plan because he knew God was with him. God gave him the wisdom for this plan. And as the story goes on, Nehemiah, you get to see his plan take place. As I read last week, as we talked about last week, Nehemiah went to the king. That was step one. He asked for help. And the king gave him permission to go do what he needed to do. Nehemiah had a God-sized goal. And he went and he did this. He completed this goal. He set his mind to it. But here's what Nehemiah did. Nehemiah had a plan. And as I said last week, you and I, we should shoot for God-sized goals like Nehemiah. Now, we can't really go and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem because they're still standing. But there are other things we can do. Like help spread the gospel. Now that's a big thing. That's a God-sized plan that we can all come up with. How are we going to do it? But here's my advice to you as you go. Find your God-sized goal. Take some time and pray about it. But as you pray about it, create a plan. Set your goal and get the steps to get there. The same can be said for any other goal as well, not just a God-sized one. Just make a plan and complete your goal. So I encourage you this week as you go out, find your God-sized goal and create your plan to complete your God-sized goal. I'm praying for you this week. God bless.